All right, guys, welcome back. So technically, after we went and helped Paul, me and Malachi were going to come back and actually work on the truck. Well, it got pretty late in the day, so we decided to just cut it there and go home for the evening. Well, after that, we had 4 days of rain. So here we are today. Hopefully we're going to get this dash wrapped up, get a couple things finished on the truck, and make sure this thing is good to go. Let's get at it. So today's projects are get this garage clean, which as you can tell, there are stuff all over the place because we've had so many projects going on. We've had the smart car, the Honda truck, the Chevy, then we went on our trip to Alaska, then we came back home, then we had to get the garage door installed, then we did other projects. So we need a reset. So we need to get all of this figured out. I mean, everything. There's stuff over here, stuff over there, all over the garage. Above the garage door, it's just crazy. So we're gonna get this handled and we will see you here pretty soon. So now that the garage is kind of cleaned up, I got more work that I need to do. We have got to get this Chevy out of the driveway. So long story short, I want to get the dash installed so I have some kind of gauges. Right now, I kind of started a little bit on it. You can see the hole in there. But as you can tell, so this is the main plug that goes onto the back of the instrument cluster. I was able to ID and tag what I could. Also ran some extra wires. I ran a wire for tag signal because my gauges will have a tag signal. And then I also ran for power to the fuel gauge. Got to get them all ran. I know the sunlight's gonna be probably a struggle in here, so I might try to figure out some way of getting the sun to move so we can better get this recorded. But from this point on, I'll kind of show you the steps on how I was able to trace certain wires, why some of those wires are still working, and we'll just go from there, get the dash figured out, get the plate drilled out for all the new gauges, and then go from there. So what I am going to try to figure out is how we can get this bezel inside the dash panel. So I cut this piece of diamond plate out. We're gonna scuff this up and paint it a gloss black. I still have to get all the holes cut. So need to figure out dimensions for all the gauges. We need to get the holes all figured out. And then where this plate actually exists in this dash, I can do one of two things. I can either get little L brackets that will go on the plastic on the back and then get that put in there solid, or I can actually take because I have my little torch, I can actually cut the plastic, heat it up, bend it over the back side of the plate because I did leave some extra room, bend it over the back side of the plate, and then rivet it in. So I feel like the rivets would look kind of cool. I feel like being able to have small bolt heads or maybe even like finished machine screws, I think that would look good as well. But until we get to that point, we got to drill the holes for the gauges. So I did buy hole saw kits. We're gonna figure out gauge sizes and then go from there. So the one thing that you do want to make sure when you're drilling holes and stuff and doing stuff like this is you want to make sure that your hole saw, okay, the hole saw here, is smaller than the diameter of the screw that holds the gauge on and is the same outside diameter as the threaded ends on the gauge. So you want to make sure that the hole that you're cutting is exactly the right size for this, but is smaller than the overall diameter of this, because this is ultimately what holds that gauge into that plate. So, and then same for the little guys too. We're going to get this plate out, and then we're going to get all the holes drilled. I'll probably do the big one in the center and then the 2 offset on either side. Because I have 4 small gauges, 1 big gauge. We'll make it work. All right, so this might actually look a little weird with the extra guys like this and then this guy with like this. But basically what I'm trying to do is, so this gauge is centered directly in the middle. Okay, that's where the steering wheel exists. And then I wanted to offset these. So I first drew these here and here. But I brought this one in a little farther over because if I want to later down the road, if I drill a 3rd hole on this side, they would be all offset equally. I think that's what I'm going to do because there's always room to grow, and then I'll have an opportunity to pull this out at a later date and drill that hole. Or drill the hole and then put a plug in it until I absolutely want to use it. I don't like that look, so we're just going to go this route and get these holes popped in here and then off to getting it scuffed and then get some paint on it. All right, guys, so man, that will work up a quick sweat, but I gotta say, man, those hole dozers, they do a great job. So got the plate cut out. As you can tell, I did leave this spot bare just in case I wanted to add another gauge later down the road. But with that being said, now we gotta sand this. I do have a small wheel. I'll just scuff it up. You only really need to scuff it up to break the polish layer off, and then we'll just shoot it with some gloss black and then let this dry. All right, so we gotta let that dry for a hot minute. Yeah, we'll come back. We're gonna probably throw at least 2 or 3 layers on this. So once that's all done, we'll allow some time for it to dry, and then we can get the gauges loaded into that and then start going from there. But first, we got to figure out wiring and go from there. So the easiest way I've been able to figure out, so in the main gauge, we need left, right turn signals, we need the high beam. All of those are going to be indicator lights in that gauge. So when you're looking at this, how are you going to figure out which ones do what? The easiest way I've been able to figure that out is you don't really need a book. It is nice to have a book, but it's not really needed. When you do a swap like this, going from an electronically controlled engine to a older style engine tends to throw systems off. So when you key on, I'm going to definitely have a light that's on for the brake light as well as ABS, because all those systems were controlled electronically. So I know that the moment I put this key into the ignition, I'm going to have two lights somewhere in this cluster that will show me power. Let's just say an easy way to find turn signal, right? You find a good ground. You find a source of hot. So red wires and yellow wires are usually going to be a good indication of solid hots, like they're hot at all time. And we know that it's a hot with key on because the light will activate when I have the key in the accessory position. Now, in order to find like dash illumination light, okay, I had to pull my control box out of the dash panel that's in the garage, because this light, this one here, even with the key on, I don't have power. But what I do have is I'll have power when I hit the switch. So that's telling me that my dash lights are illuminating. So this is going to be the wire that I will choose to run for all my hots for the bulbs in the new gauges to illuminate them at night. So how do you find left-right turn signals? Well, you just come in here. Like I said, I've already done some troubleshooting. So left turn is going to be this one, okay? Light's not coming on, but it will flash when the left is signaled. You can also verify that by the lights on the vehicle. So we know that that is the left turn because you go down for left. We clearly know that that is not the right turn signal because it's not illuminating. But if we go to this one, we can clearly tell that that is illuminating with the right turn signal activated. And it's for everything. You can do that for everything. The nice thing with troubleshooting wiring is it literally goes to one source or multiple sources. You'll have power coming out to a switch, and then it goes to whatever that switch operates. So it's really easy. It's a lot of people tend to freak out about scenarios when they're troubleshooting with electricity. But yeah, your main hots are usually going to be a red or a yellow in GM. They can sometimes be white. They can sometimes be black. So the easiest way to indicate that is going to be with just a small light. I mean, you can get really crazy, start getting into dwell, resistance. You can actually look up continuity if you have a multimeter to see if that's the exact wire you need. But see how that red is also a constant power with switch power. So what I'm getting by is that now that we know that these are certain wires that we're going to want to keep, we've labeled them. Because these are all wires that will have a signal coming from the chassis wiring. High beams, same thing. So we go, high beam is this green wire. These were all just lights to indicate that they were on in the dash. So nothing illuminated. With your headlights on, high beam off, high beam off. So all of these are basically idiot lights and or power signals that I will need to run for the gauges that I bought. There were two things that I did not have, and tack signal. So I needed to run a tack wire to the HEI distributor for the old school small block Chevy. Another one I needed was volts for the power signal in to the fuel gauge. Fuel gauge used to get power directly from the ECU. No longer happens because the ECU doesn't exist. So I needed to run a dedicated hot out of my power distribution box so I can have power going to the gauge, because the gauge is what recognizes the resistance field coming from the gauge in the tank, the sending unit. But yeah, that's basically the wiring in a nutshell. There's 6 wires out of the 35 wires that are in this plug that I need. Everything else is either not in use, or I have 2 dedicated power signals that I can possibly pull off of to power other circuits. That's the one nice thing that I can say about this truck and the company that built it, is they did build it very simply, and being able to gut everything that the ECU controls, I still have radio. I still have everything in this truck that operates. CD player, all my exterior headlights, that's all on a different harness. The ECU was only on its own engine controlled harness. So everything that had to deal with the engine is gone. Because, as you can tell, nothing is electronically controlled on this one. So let's get back at it. We're gonna cut that harness plug out and then start getting terminal ends wired so I can just plug them in. And then once I plug them in, I can just wrap them up with tape. That way they will never back off. Because I do want the availability of being able to, if I have to get back in there, I can just unplug it and then take the whole dash out with me. Okay, so this is the gauge cluster. So we have our speedometer, RPM, fuel, volts. This will be oil pressure as well as coolant temp. These 2 are actually already in the truck. So what we're going to do right now is actually figure out how to build a small harness for this to work. Now, old board, as you can tell, the factory plug actually just plugged in here. Because this is just a plastic board, there's not another plug. I do enjoy reusing factory plugs, even though we're only going to be using about 6 circuits out of it. The fact of the matter is that you have a connection that can easily couple and disconnect. So with that being said, unfortunately, we can't do what I enjoy doing, which is using these. They're called repin keys. So it's just different types and kinds. When you're going into the back of a plug, you can actually push these in. It will release that wire for that pin, and then you can move it, do whatever you have to do. So it is convenient having these. I've had these forever. They're just really nice to have. So what we're going to do instead, we're actually just going to build a small harness that will include grounds. Always do multiple grounds. You never want to just put all your grounds together on one of these and then just one spot in the car to ground it to the vehicle. I usually do 2, at least 2. I'll go to the structure behind the dash, and then I'll usually take one all the way down to the floor and screw it into the floor. As you can tell on the back of this, so some of these gauges, so these black and white wires here, these just run the illumination for the gauge. So because these are backlit, I already put the bulbs in there that I want. They're going to be green. So what we got to do is we just have to connect all of our illuminations together. So that's going to be for everyone, even these guys. I'll build a small little harness that will allow those to plug in. And then we're going to run all of our grounds, including the ground for our main gauge. I really wish I could have found this as a white background, but it's okay. The nice thing is that this will be perfectly fine. I enjoy this specific gauge in particular because if you guys ever saw the build that I did for the hard body, they're GPS, so you don't have a speedometer cable. They're not digital, like you don't need a digital signal for speedo. It's just GPS. So there's a little black box that you can just stick onto the dash right at the bottom of the window, and it's good. I don't know what I'm gonna do. I'll probably set this up on a time lapse, and we'll just start getting connections made and then getting wires routed. Me having a bus, I have access to a lot of wire. So when I dewired my school bus, I have wires of every color, size, type, whatever. So we're gonna use some of this bus wire and make a small little harness. So we have these gauges wired. So what I'm doing here is the power for the lights that illuminate the gauges, that will be its own power source. I want to make sure that if I lose the bulbs, if for some reason these bulbs go out, whether it's bad power, I don't lose my gauges. So the gauge power that actually controls signal to the gauges, I don't know if you can see that or not, but power, this one over here, power. I want to make sure the actual gauges can function and do what they have to do in order to operate properly. So this 12 volt will be going into a dedicated 12 volt. This 12 volt power will actually be getting powered by my illumination. So when I turn the headlight switch on, this will power all of the backlighting in all these gauges. And then I left a little extra on this one so I could hook it to those gauges once we get them out of the truck and get them into this gauge cluster. Now, a lot of these other ones, this is tack signal. So all of these are going to get female ends, left right turn signal. I also put a terminal end on this ground. This ground I'm actually going straight into the dash, into the reinforcement. And then I also made a super long one that will actually go down into the kick panel. And it also looks like somebody was able to show up and help me get this thing done today. So we're going to try to get this knocked out. Alright guys, so we made these little plates. They're just some leftover scrap metal that I had laying around. We needed small enough angles to be able to fit behind the plate for the gauges. And then we needed it thin and pliable enough to be able to go into the plastic of the dash without causing the dash to crack. I might do 2 more, I might not. We'll just see how these are. We did do 2 longer ones because we have a little more room on the upper part of the bezel in relation to the lower part of the bezel. So we wanted to make sure that if we do need to do any kind of final adjustments or anything, or get it test fitted, we're not going to drill holes into the actual dash until it's absolutely needed. Once we get the holes drilled in the plate, we're going to get these guys bolted onto the back and then figure out how far forward or backwards we need to be in relation to the hole in the dash. So with that being said, alright guys, so we were able to we made little brackets in here, if you can see those little guys. Just some pieces of scrap metal. Just some little L brackets to keep the plate mounted into the bezel. I did cut a bunch of the bezel off, the factory bezel, to get these gauges to sit far enough out that I had enough clearance in the back. So with that being said, they do look pretty good. So now we're going to just make sure, do we have to remove these in relation to where this clips in to the dash? If we have to cut these off. If we just have to cut these off with a grinder or just pull them out and put in smaller ones. I think I'm just going to cut them off with the cutting wheel. But yeah, this is looking pretty good. I got to add 1 green wire to this terminal here for the fuel. That fuel wire is the resistance wire that comes from the fuel tank that actually gives you your level. So I'll still have to do some research, but I want to make sure that all of the wires that I need back here are back here, and then we'll just reroute those, loom them up, and put them underneath the dash so I can later route them to where they need to go. But all these are labeled, ID'd, ready to go. It's going to be really hard to get you guys in here, but I'm going to try and do my best. So we have all of our IDs labeled. We officially have all the gauges into the bezel. Now we need to cut all of the ones that I have labeled here off. And then I have 2 reds, those 2 little, well, they look like pink wires now, but those 2 little pink wires, need to get those clipped and then sealed because those are always hot. Other than that, yeah, let's get this all broken down. I'm gonna put male connectors on all these. We're gonna get it buttoned up, and then we should be able to test everything, make sure it's good to go. Yes, don't mind the manual and automatic. This was an automatic. It did have a 4L60E, but I MV 3500 swapped it. So all this needs to come out, and yeah, so let's get this buttoned up. So I think this is where I'm going to stop for today. Unfortunately, I cannot get all of this finished yet, but I am going through all of the circuits and just making sure that everything is working as they should. So basically, as you can see, the gauges. So when I turn on the lights, these are backlit, but you really can't see it until you get a hand over them because it's still pretty bright out. Everything works inside the gauge. You got left, right, turn on the headlights, high beams, high beam indicator comes on. Everything's doing what it should. I do have to run out the ohms, figure out which wire is actually going to the fuel tank and wire that in. But I figure this is a perfect spot to just stop for the night. I got a couple things I got to do tomorrow. I probably won't get a full day out of it. I technically started today at around 1, so it's getting dark. I'm gonna go in, make some dinner for my lady, and we will see you guys the next time I work on this. All right, guys, so day 3 of this crazy install. So all we really have left to do is just make sure that we can get this dash put back together. There is a couple switches that I have to pull out of the dash, like this one. I really would like to also put a hole here. There is an additional, we have to create a circuit for the front diff actuator. So what I'm gonna do is I was just gonna put that on a switch or use the 4-wheel drive selector to reroute power to the switch to engage and disengage. That's how it was done, but because we removed all of the electronically controlled systems, that got signal from the ECU, so we're just going to negate all that because the ECU no longer exists. So with that being said, let me throw some keys in this. We'll put the automatic all the way down into first, and then see if we can get this slid in here. So here we go. So with this being said, so I have this automatic shifter, right? It does nothing anymore. Absolutely nothing. So we're probably gonna take that out. Yeah. There's still a couple other things that I need to do, like get the rest of the 4-wheel drive system put on, get everything finished and finalized, but I'm just not at that point to where I want to do that because I don't want to climb around on the ground right now today. There's a bunch of other stuff that I'm trying to do. I just wanted to see this in and see what it looked like because I was super excited. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So all of that I've basically changed to running analog gauges. I still have to plumb in the wire for the sending unit, and yeah, that's about it. I'll get you guys in here so you can see this real fast.